What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some news about the most recent major update for No Rest for the Wicked, a game I last checked out at the very beginning of May, once they launched their big update known as The Breach. However, around that same time, it was noted that Moon Studios moved on to basically fully self-publish this game, and that came with some growing pains as they moved away from their previous publisher and everything, which is the reason it took them so long from launch to get out this big update. But unfortunately, that update itself was frankly a bit rough. It had a lot of simply rough edges that needed a lot of testing. It also unfortunately had some not insignificant bugs, like with the backstab as an example. And so my own video on the subject noted that while there were some really good changes in there, it definitely needed, frankly, a balance pass among other things. Now, fortunately for us, Moon Studios pretty much immediately got to work on exactly this and started pumping out hotfixes to address the most egregious stuff until today, where we got a major update that was designed to, of course, address the rest of it. And I'm happy to report that it is, in fact, feeling much, much better after this update. So naturally then, I wanted to, of course, cover that update, talk about some of the changes, what to expect, and frankly, how the game is shaping up. First, let's talk about a few of those hotfixes that happened in between The Breach and The Breach Refined. And I'm mostly just going to focus on the most important stuff here. For starters, as I mentioned, there was a bug with the backstab mechanic that made it essentially impossible to sneak up on anyone. They sorted that out pretty quickly. They also made adjustments to the overall danger level of each area as you experience it, basically kind of moving out the progression curve of how enemies ramp up throughout the game. They also made further adjustments to parry timing as well as the iframes on your various dodges, which all felt incredibly restrictive with the initial patch. So already just from having played this in order to make this video, that stuff is feeling better as well. And then alongside that stuff, they added some scaling for the post-current campaign. So after you beat the current content that's available and you keep playing, they adjusted some of the scaling for that after. And then lastly, some quality of life changes like adjustments to fall damage. They halved it, as well as requiring you to fall a bit farther before you actually took fall damage to begin with. And then that brings us to, of course, today's actual big patch called The Breach Refined, which brings many great features, everything from entirely new systems to basic quality of life things. Now, probably one of the bigger things straight away is that they've added ledge protection to things like your attack animations and your special abilities via like runes and stuff, meaning that doing those things won't send you careening off an edge to your death, but it is still possible to be like pushed off of these things or simply fall off of them. Alongside that, they did add an entirely brand new quest while also updating a few of them. But speaking of quests, one big thing this update does add is the fact that all quests grant experience now, of course making it a bit easier to level up as opposed to just having to like grind out from enemies. Speaking of enemies though, probably one of the bigger things this patch does really is includes all new difficulty options. So essentially there's an easy, normal, hard mode now, with the version of the game we have been playing being normal difficulty. Now there is an easier difficulty when you make a realm, which is going to reduce enemy HP by about 20%, but then the much bigger thing there is that it reduces enemy damage by half, which will of course make the game significantly easier for people who play on that difficulty. Normal is of course the default, but then Path of the Unspoken or hard mode increases enemy HP and damage by 20 and 35% respectively, but also increases the poise of your enemies, meaning it's harder to like stun them essentially. And to compensate for some of that, you actually also get more experience for playing on this harder mode as well. But that's not the only big system change, in the sense that they properly reworked fast travel. That is to say, they added a system that doesn't feel terrible, to be kind of blunt about it. So your checkpoints, or your whispers, are now divided up into Elder and Lesser Whispers. The Elder versions are the ones you can fast travel from, allowing you to freely move in between all of the ones you've unlocked. Lesser Whispers, while not initially as free with their fast travel, can be upgraded by making offerings to them, which will then eventually, once you've done that enough, allow you to upgrade them to an Elder Whisper, basically. Another big addition here was actually some changes to the rune system. So runes are things you can add to like weapons and whatnot to use your focus as special abilities. They've added a utility rune grouping that is going to be added to your character rather than your weapon. Essentially, you'll start with 2 of these, which can then be upgraded to 4, where instead of slotting utility runes into your weapons to use them, they just go directly on your character, and you're going to start start out with a heal rune by default, which means as you build up focus by simply being in combat and performing actions, you can just use that as a heal now, which should make things a little bit easier in terms of healing via like food and whatnot, which is how you would do it previously, but was limited to various charges. Whereas this healing via this rune system, allowing for much more consistent healing, of course, if you keep up with it, as long as you build up the focus to actually use it. So even there is a little bit of a trade-off, but it does feel much better already. Another thing that they've added via this patch is something I was very happy to see, because it's something we saw in the first Berserker Kazan very recently, where attempts at bosses will actually grant you experience now. Basically, the damage you deal to a boss is what determines how much experience you gain when you fail that boss attempt. Now, the reason I love this is simply that it effectively allows you to keep progressing even as you are attempting to defeat a boss, which is going to make that challenge and hurdle easier to overcome, which is something that felt really great in Kazan, so I'm glad to see that was adopted here. They've also made some pretty big changes to how enchantments work. Basically, enchantments are all divided up into various groups now. Things like attack, elemental infusions, focus, health, stamina, defense, and speed. So what this means is that none of these enchantments that you put on an item can be from the same group. This allowed them to do a few things, which is actually buff some of these now that you can't stack them because of the grouping limitation, so those buffs individually can be stronger, which I thought was a pretty nice change in and of itself. But that is not all, though the other changes are a little more granular. They made a variety of changes to things like balance, as well as adjusting some of the boss fights as well. To give a simple example here, as I already mentioned, they halved fall damage. Putting points into your focus attribute now also increases the rate at which you gain focus. You get more stamina per point invested in that attribute, which of course allows you to do more. This while also increasing the soft cap for that stat, of course, meaning that you could just get more stamina across the board, alongside a host of other smaller, more minute changes that aren't really worth going into individually, but I'll probably drop the patch notes down below if you want to go through them for yourself. All in all, I would say that this particular patch really brings the Breach update into focus, and it makes the entire game feel significantly better to play, which is probably no surprise given that a lot of these changes were based directly off of feedback that they got from their initial launch of the Breach. Simply put, I think No Rest for the Wicked with this patch is actually in a really good place that feels good to play. And it is my hope then that this puts them in a position to start developing the story and things like that now that they've got everything with their publisher sorted out, and the rest of this game's trip through early access might be a bit smoother as a result. As I have maintained up to this point, I think this game is going to be incredible when it's done, and Moon Studios does seem extremely committed to making the game just that. So hopefully I'll have some more news for you about this game soon, as I do plan to continue covering all of its updates and the like, but for right now that's pretty much going to do it. I certainly hope you enjoyed the video, but by all means let me know how you feel about this one down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, but regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.